Dear students, let us continue the discussion of chapter number 2 from operating systems, that is operating system services. So this is my second lecture from this chapter. So in the first lecture we have discussed about some basic part of the operating system services, like we saw how exactly the different services are provided. Okay, so we also saw what are the system calls and some basics of the system calls. So today again we'll continue the discussion of system calls, and after this we'll see some management perspectives also. So let us continue the discussion of same today. So as I told you here, we'll continue the discussion with the system calls only. So in my previous lecture we saw the basics of system call. So what exactly the system call is, because we know that the operating system works in two modes. The dual mode of operation we have, that is we have the normal user mode operation and the super user, that is the kernel mode operation. So whatever the system specific activities are there, so all are carried out in the kernel mode only. The user will not be having direct access to those services. So that's why whenever user want to use the operating system services that are available from the kernel mode, so for that your system will be going to providing these system calls. Okay, so again in turn using system calls directly for the user is not advisable. So that's why here it is better to use the APIs, that is application programming interfaces. Okay, so compared to system call, using application programming interface is very easy. So that's why what the system will do is, so it is going to provide the set of APIs and which are internally mapped to the system calls. Okay, so this is the basics of system calls. So today we'll see, so what are the different types of system calls that are available, because as I told you, whatever the operating system services that are available from the kernel side, so these are provided in the form of system calls. So again we know that there are plenty of operating system services, so that's why the title of this chapter itself is operating system services. Okay, so again whatever the services that are provided through the system call, so we group the system call itself into the different groups. So these types we are going to discuss today. Okay, so in this the first type of system call is the process control. As the name itself indicates, process control means here whatever the system calls that are grouped under this category, so all are related to the process concept. Okay, all are useful for controlling the process. So what is process, already you know. Okay, so whenever you start executing a program, a separate process will be created. Okay, and the process starts execution. So when the process is running, so in order to control the execution of that process, so whatever the activities you want to perform, so to perform those activities, some system calls are available. So those system calls are categorized under this group. Okay, so we'll discuss this one by one. So here in the first group we have that is in process control, the first system calls are end and abort. Okay, so although these both look similar, that is end means this is also to finish and the abort is also to finish, but there is a difference. End means what? Whenever a process is executing and if the process completes its task, okay, so in that case the process will complete or it stop its execution normally. So that is done through this particular one, that is end. But abort means what? During the execution of your process, in between if you want to interrupt or if you want to forcibly stop the execution of that process, so you have to use abort here. Okay, so sometimes it is done forcibly from the user side, and sometimes automatically the process may be terminated abnormally. Okay, so that's why especially in the second case, that when the process is terminated abnormally automatically, okay, without user intervention, so in that case the one very important information that is generated, it is nothing but core dump. Okay, so a particular it's like a crash report. So whenever a process halts its execution abnormally automatically, so in that case some information will be generated. Okay, so it is called as core dump. Okay, so what is the use of this core dump? So you can analyze this information in order to understand what was the problem for abnormal termination of your process. In most of the times, so we have something called debugging. So debugging is a process of identifying and correcting the errors in a program. Okay. So most of the time the core dump will be used for debugging. So again we have a category of people working on this. These are called as debuggers. So these debuggers will use this core dump file in order to identify the reasons and to overcome those, so that such kind of situation will not occur in future. Okay. So this is about the first two system calls, that is end and abort. Okay. So after this we have two more, that is load and execute. Okay. So load means this is to load a program, because we know that usually the programs are stored in the secondary memory. Whenever you want to execute a program, first you have to load that program into the main memory. So for that the system call is load. So once you load that program to the main memory, you have to start executing that. So for that we have a system call, that is execute. Okay. So during the execution of a process, whenever a particular process is running, so in between, if it want to start executing some other program, okay, as a part of that currently running program, so in that case it can call this load and execute. Okay. But in this case, a very important question comes is, whenever a process, a new program starts execution, a new process will be created. Okay. So whenever this new process completes its execution, the question is whether the execution pointer will be returned back to the main program, or it will be returned back to the process in which this particular program is called. Okay. So again the answer is it depends on how, whether the first process is still waiting for the second process to complete its execution, or whether it has terminated. Okay. So this is about this load and execute. So the next we have create process and terminate process. The name itself indicates, whenever you want to create a new process, you can use this create process. If you want to terminate the execution of a process, so you can call this terminate process also. So here already we saw this end. So along with this we have one more system call, that is terminate process also. Okay. So after this the next one is get process attributes and set process attributes. Okay. So we know that whenever a particular program is executing, some process will be running. Okay. And during the execution of that particular process, so sometimes you may want to, or your system may want to know what are the attributes that are available for that process. Okay. So if you want to get that information, the attribute information of the currently executing process, you can use this get process attributes. Okay. Similarly, during the execution of a particular process, if you come to know that a particular attribute or a particular permission is not available for that process, so temporarily on this part you want to change the permission, or you want to give access to that particular process. So for that we have set to process attributes system call. Okay. So after this we have wait for time. So wait for time means this is in order to make your process to wait for a particular time. So again there are so many situations in which the process should wait for its execution. For example, let us consider it is waiting for a particular resource which is not presently available. So in that case you can let your process to wait for a specific time. You can specify the time in terms of millisecond, and you can send your process to the waiting state. So for that we have again system call category, it is wait for time. So similarly we have wait event and signal event. Okay. So wait event means here the process will be waiting for a particular event. Okay. And signal event means it will be, a process will be waiting for a particular event, and whenever that event occurs you have to send a notification about the occurrence of that event. So it is nothing but signal event. Okay. So along with this we have again two more, that is allocate and free memory. So during the execution of your process, so if your process wants some more amount of memory in order to complete its task, so you can use this allocate system call to allocate a memory for that. Okay. And once the execution of that process is completed, whatever the memory that it was using, it should be compulsorily returned back to the system, so that it will be used for the next user or the next process. So that's why in order to free that memory you can use the free memory. Okay. So this is about the system calls that comes under the first category, that is process control. Okay, so next we'll see the second category of system calls, that is file management. Okay, so as the name itself indicates, file management means, so whatever the system calls that are grouped under this, all are related to the activity of file management. Okay, so let us discuss these also one by one. So again, the first we have create file and delete file. The name itself indicates, whenever you want to create a new file, you can use this create file system call. Similarly, if you want to delete the file, you can use this delete file system call. Okay, so after that we have open file and close file. So open file and close file means, if you have an existing file with you, if you want to open that file, okay, again whenever you open a file, again you have to specify the modes also, like the file may be opened in three modes, that is in read only mode, write only mode, or execute. So these three permissions will be there. So all these things are to be mentioned whenever you open a file. Okay, so that's why here, in order to open the file, you can use the system call, that is open file. Similarly, whenever you complete the task of that file, you have to close that file. Okay, so for that also we have a system call, that is close file. Okay, so similarly we have read, write and reposition. So read is to read the content from the file, write is to write or change the content of the file, and reposition is to change the position of the reading head or the writing head presently on the file. Okay, so that is to change the position of the pointer. Okay, so along with this we have again similar kind of system calls, that is get and set file attributes, similar to get and set process attributes. Okay, so during the execution of your process, if you want to know what are the attributes that the present file is having, you can use get attributes, get file attributes system call. Okay, if you want to modify the file attributes, you can use set file attributes. Okay, so this is nothing but the second category of system calls, that is file management. So next we have the third category of system calls, that is device management. So here also, as the name itself indicates, device management means, so here we have the set of system calls which are useful for managing the devices. Okay, so before we discuss this, so let me tell you one thing, like especially in Unix operating system, everything is considered as a file. So there each device is also associated with a corresponding file. So whatever the operations you perform for the file, the same operations can be performed for the devices also. Okay, so whatever usually whatever the system call that are useful for the file management, so all can be used for the device management also. Okay, so this is for general discussion, especially for the Unix systems, but here we have considered in general for all the systems. So let us see what are the system calls that falls under this category. Okay, so here the first we have request device and release device. So request device means what? We know that whatever the resources or whatever the devices that are available, especially in the modern distributed systems, all are shared among the different users. Okay, so whenever you want to use a particular device, first you have to send a request to acquire that device, because we know that usually a device will be occupied at a time by only one user or one process, and if any other user or process want to have that particular resource or device, he should wait until that device is available. Okay, so that's why here whenever your process or whenever you want to start using a particular device, you want to acquire a device, you have to send a request. So through this system call, that is request device system call. Okay, so once that particular device is available, so you can start using that device, and whenever you complete the task of that device, so it is your duty to return that device back to the system, so that the other waiting processes can acquire that device. Okay, so that's why whenever your task is over, in order to return back that device, you can use this release device system call. Okay, so after this, as I told you, whatever the these three operations we are able to perform on the files, the same are possible on the device also, that is read, write and reposition. Okay, So apart from this, we have get device attributes and set device attributes. This is similar to get file attributes and get set file attributes. Okay, so here if you want to know what are the attributes that are available for that device, you can use this get device attributes, and if you want to modify the attributes, you can use the set device attributes. Okay, so along with this, we have one more, that is logically attach or detach devices. Okay, so after this, the next one is logically attach or detach devices. So that's what this is for the request and release. And again, if you want to attach the new device to the existing device, or if you want to detach from that device, means this is if you want to create the cluster of devices, so in those cases you can use these two also. Okay, so this is about the third type. Next is the fourth type, that is information maintenance. Okay, so this information maintenance comes into picture whenever you want to maintain the information. Okay, so we know that many times the systems will be be writing the user programs in order to transfer the information from a user program to the operating system, and from operating system to the user program. Okay, so in this case, most of the time your program may want to know the status of the different entities. Like your program may want to know the current time, current date, okay, the system data, okay, and attributes and so on. Okay, so for all these things, so again the different system calls will be available. So these will be categorized under this category. Okay, that is information maintenance. Okay, so here we have the sample in system calls that comes under this category, that is get time or date, that is get date. Okay, this is to get the current time and current date. So we have set time to set the time or change the time. After that, set date also available to change the date. So after that, get system data and set system data. Okay, so this is to retrieve the systems some useful information, and this is also to the set system data is to modify or change the system's properties or information. Okay, similarly we have get process, file or device attributes. Okay, so means here during the execution, if you want to know the attributes of process or the file or of the device, so you can use get process attributes, get file attributes and get device attributes. Okay, similarly if you want to modify these attributes, we have set process attributes, set file attributes and set device attributes. Okay, so these will come under the fourth category, that is information maintenance. So after this, the fifth one is communication. Okay, so this communication comes into picture whenever we have the communication among the processes. So we know that operating system is having a separate service that is available for the inter-process communication in order to facilitate the communication among the executing processes. So again, there are mainly two ways in which the inter-process communication can be implemented. In the first way, we have message passing technique, and second one is the shared memory approach. So in message passing technique, what happens, the processes will share the information or exchange the information through message. Means one process sends message to the another process, the another way send message to this one, the direct sending of message, or through indirect messaging, like in between the two processes, a particular mailbox will be there, and through that mailbox the messages will be passed. So this is message passing technique communication. So another mechanism for implementing inter-process communication is through shared memory. Okay, so a particular block or the memory area will be shared among the different processes. Okay, and here whatever the processes we have, we categorize the processes into the two types, that is reader process and writer process. Reader process means it will be reading the data from that shared memory block. Writer process means it will be writing or storing data to the shared memory block. So in this way, again indirect communication takes place among the processes. Okay, so in order to facilitate all these things, whatever the system calls that are available okay, in order to make use of the operating system services. So all are categorized under the communication system calls. Okay, so this may be create or delete communication connection. Means here, in order to have a communication among the processes, a communication connection should be there. So to create or to delete the communication connection, the system calls can be used. Similarly, we have the send messages and receive messages, okay, especially for the message passing technique. So similarly, transfer status information, okay, name itself indicates, and after that attach and detach the remote devices. Okay, so this is again for managing the communication among the devices. Okay, so this is about the types of system calls. So after this, we'll discuss the system programs. So I think in one of my previous lecture we saw the computer system structure. So in that computer system structure, we saw that there are mainly 4 parts in the computer system. So it's in that figure also we mentioned this. So the bottommost part is hardware. Above hardware we have operating system. Above operating system we have system programs, and above system programs we have the users or the applications. Okay. So the system programs plays a very important role. Means above operating system means obviously operating system will be providing some services in order to facilitate its task, but there will be some programs which are required to modify or to maintain the different resources of your system, and these will come under this system programs. Okay, so that we discussed today. So the system programs provide a convenient environment for program development and execution. So these again system programs can be divided into the following different categories. Okay, so let us discuss these one by one. So the first one is file management. Okay, so the file management means here we have the system programs that are helpful for the file management activities, like to create the file, to delete the file, to copy the file, rename, print, okay, and list or sort the files, manipulate the files and directories. Okay, so for all these things, whatever the system programs we use, so these are nothing but file management system programs. Okay, so after this the next one we have the status information system programs. So the status information, as the name itself indicates, if you want to know the status of the different entities of the system, so whatever the system programs you use, so these will fall under the status information system program. So what type of status your program may or you may be interested in. So in the previous discussion also, in previous slide also we saw this. Okay, like if you want to know the present date, time, okay, the amount of free space available on the memory on the disk. Okay, so presently how many users are logged in. Okay, so similarly the status information with respect to the resources, presently which user is using which resource, okay, and so on. So all the status information will be available through these system programs. So these are nothing but status information system programs. So after this, next one we have file modification. And the name itself indicates, in order to modify the content of the file, so whatever the system programs that are available, so these are nothing but the file modification. So the best example for this file modification system programs are your text editors. Okay, so again, system program means it's an system, it's an application which you want to install on your system in order to use that. Okay, so in order to change the content of the file, we need to have a particular editor. It is usually a text editor. So all these text editors will come under this file modification. So after this, the next one we have programming support. Okay, so programming language support means what? So whenever you write a program, you want a particular platform in order to type that program, okay, and in order to create an object code of that program. Okay, so that's why whatever the support that are required for that language, that is very important, and that is taken care by this programming language support programs. The best example is you may need the compilers, assemblers, debuggers, okay, interpreters and so on. So all these things are required for your particular program. Okay, so these will come under programming language support. So after this, next we have program loading and execution. Okay, so in program loading and execution means, so whenever you write a program, so you need some means of loading that program for the compilation, for the assembly, and for execution. Okay, so usually we have some IDEs like interactive development environment. Okay, so all those IDEs will come under this program loading and execution. So after this, at last we have the communications. Okay, so here again, communication means it may be an interprocess communication, or it may be a communication among the processes, users, and the computer systems. Okay, so in order to establish this communication, whatever the means that are required, so these will come under this one. The best example for this is your web browsers. Okay, so through the web browsers, you are able to access the web pages. Okay, means in other words, whatever the information that is available at the server side, so you are able to fetch that and you can display that on the client side. So this is again one way of communication. Okay, similarly we have the email service, so that will also come under the communication. Okay, so all these are nothing but the system programs, so which we saw. Okay, and after this we have one more category of programs, that is nothing but the application programs. Okay, as the name itself indicates, whenever you want to perform a particular application or a particular specific task on the system, so you can have the corresponding application software for that. It is called as application program. Okay, so so that's what the most users view of the operating system is defined by the system programs and not the actual system calls. So that's what already we saw that the system calls are not user friendly. The user may not remember the entire details of the system call in order to use that. So that's why we need some sort of interface. It is called as application programming interface, that is APIs. So through these APIs we'll be making use of the system call. So that's why usually the user's view of the operating system is defined by the system programs and not by the actual system calls. Okay, so after this we'll discuss operating system design and implementation. Okay, so the design and implementation of an operating system is not a foolproof solution, or it's a solvable, but most of the solutions or most of the approaches that are already available, these have proven to be successful. Okay, so the internal structure of the different operating systems can vary widely, because see, we know in today's life, in today's computer systems also, we have the different kind of operating systems. Already you might have used those also. Okay, so every operating system will have its own structure. Okay, so it will be something different than the other operating systems. Okay, so that's why general discussion is very difficult here with respect to the operating system design and implementation. Okay, so you have to start by defining the goals and specifications of the operating system, and we know that the operating system's choice of hardware and the type of system is also affected by the operating system. So first we'll see the goals of the operating system. So again, whenever you define the goals, again it depends on the perspective. Okay, so for the user the goals will be different, and for the system the goals will be different. Okay, so for the user side we have user goals, and for the system side we have the system goals. For the users, what he expects, so he expects operating system should be convenient to use, easy to use, easy to learn, reliable, safe, and fast. Okay, but for the system side, operating system should be easy to design, implement, and maintain, as well as it should be flexible, reliable, error free, and efficient. Okay, so this is the first step, that is first we have to define the goals and the specifications. Okay, so once you define the goals and specification, so next we have the policies and mechanisms. Okay, so what is policy and what is mechanism? So here we have one simple example in order to tell you what exactly policy and mechanism. So policy will tell you what will be done, and mechanism will tell you how to do it. Understood? Policy means this is just a saying that what is to be done, what will be done. Okay, Whereas mechanism means how it should be done or how to do it. You consider an example of a timer. So we know that the timer means what? So it is going to it is used for setting a timer, and whenever you set a timer, okay, so it is going to notify whenever that amount of time is elapsed. So this is mechanism. But what is policy? Whether I have to set a timer or not, or if I want to set, for how much time I have to set. So this is a decision policy. Okay, so this is a difference. Okay, so this is the second step of the operating system and design. That is, we have to design the policies and we have to implement the mechanisms. Okay, so here the mechanisms determine how to do something. Okay, and policies decide what will be done. Okay, so the separation of policy from the mechanism is again a very important principle, and it allows maximum flexibility if policy decisions are to be changed later. Okay, so this is the second step, and third step is the actual implementation. Okay, so when it comes for the implementation of an operating system, so traditionally the operating system was written in assembly low level languages, like in assembly level languages, but nowadays whatever the modern operating systems we have, so these are written in the higher level languages such as C or C++. Okay, so when we have written the operating systems in the higher level languages other than lower level languages, so there are some advantages and some disadvantages, so that we'll discuss now. So what are the advantages of writing operating system in higher level language? The first one is the code can be written faster, it is more compact, and is easier to understand and debug. So this is the first one. Obviously, whenever you write the code in high level programming languages, okay, so that code will be faster. Okay, it will be written faster because we have a structured programming constructs. So it will be more compact and it will be easier to understand and debug. The second one is improvements in compiler technology will improve the generated code for the entire operating system by simple recompilation. So we have a lot of enhancements in the compiler technology, so we can make use of that also. So the third one is an operating system is far easier to port. The portability becomes very simple, very easy when we use the higher level languages. For example, when the MS-DOS was written, so it was written on Intel 8088 assembly language. Okay, but consequently it was available only on the Intel family of CPUs. It was not portable, or it was not available for the other family of CPUs. Why? Because it was written in the 8088 assembly language. But you consider Linux. So Linux operating system is written in the C and is available on the number of different CPUs, including Intel, Motorola, SPARC, MIPS, and so on. Okay, so this is an best example of getting portability advantage whenever we write a program of the operating system in high level language like C. Okay, so the only possible disadvantage of using high level language for operating system is the reduced speed and increased storage requirements. Okay, so this is about the design and implementation of the operating system. So next we'll see the operating system structure. Okay, so here we'll discuss the structure of a different type of operating systems. So first we'll see this simple structure. So as the name itself indicates, this is the simplest possible operating system. So in this category, many operating systems have not started to be the operating system. They have started with a very small, simple and a limited system, a small code they have started, and they just went on adding the code to that in order to generate, or in order to evolve it to be the operating system. So the best example for this is MS-DOS. So it was written to provide the most functionality in the least space. So it was not divided into the modules carefully. So MS-DOS was also limited by the hardware of its era, because in the previous slide itself we saw the MS-DOS was written on 8086 assembly language. So that's why it was possible to use it only on Intel processors. It was not possible to use it on the different systems. Okay. So another example of such a simple system is the Unix operating system, the original Unix operating system. So it was initially limited by the hardware functionality. It consists of two separable parts, that is kernel and the system programs. So this is about the simple structure, the first category. So you can see the example of the simple structure operating system, that is MS-DOS here. So here we have the MS-DOS layer structure. You can see at the bottom we have the ROM BIOS device drivers. So this is core hardware part. Above this we have MS-DOS device drivers. Above this we have resident system programs, and above this we have the application programs. So one very important thing you can see here is, because if you understand this, you will come to know what are the drawback of this architecture. So here you can see this MS-DOS device driver can directly access this ROM device driver. We consider this as the bare hardware. So again, the resident system programs can also access this bare hardware. The application programs can also access this bare hardware directly. So that's why here allowing the access to this bare hardware directly for this application program itself is the biggest mistake or the biggest problem with this MS-DOS operating system. Because what happens here, whenever you make this is available for this particular application software, your system will become the most vulnerable. Okay, means here we know that the application program means the user will be developing so many things, and by mistake if it does any thing which will harm this particular hardware, then your entire system will get crashed or your entire system is going to collapse. So this is the major disadvantage of this particular architecture. Okay. So after this, the next one we'll see is the layered approach. As the name itself indicates, layered approach means here the operating system will be divided into the number of layers. Okay, and each layer represents a particular level, and usually the layers will be arranged in a particular fashion so that the lower level layers will be there and higher level layers will be there. Okay, and here the arrangement will be in this way, like only the higher level layer can make use of the services of the lower level. Okay, the vice versa is not possible. Okay, so that's what here the operating system is divided into a number of layers, which nothing but levels only, and each built on top of the lower layers. So the bottom layer is layer 0, it is the hardware, and the highest layer N is the user interface. With the modularity, layers are selected such that each uses the functions or the services of only the lower level layer. So that's what I told. So the layers are arranged in such a way that only the lower level layer services will be used for the higher level services. So you can consider the arrangement here. So we have the number of layers. So as we saw, the layer 0 is the hardware, layer N is the user interface, and in between this 0 to N we have again so many layers. And here these are arranged in such a way that only the higher level layer can make use of the services of lower level layer. Like here, layer 1 can make use of the services of layer 0. Okay. Similarly, layer 1 can make use of the services of layer 1 and layer 0. But layer 0 cannot make use of the services of layer 1 and so on. Okay. So the example for this is the traditional Unix system structure. Okay. So the traditional Unix system structure is based on the layered approach. So here you can see here at the bottom again we have the hardware part. So we have here terminal controller. So after that device controllers, disk and tapes, memory controllers and physical memory. Okay, and here above this we have the kernel part. So here we have kernel interface to the hardware. So this is kernel part, this is hardware part. So in order to have the communication between these, we have an interface. It is kernel interface to the hardware. Okay. So here as a part of this kernel we have the different system programs, so and different components that are available. So here we have signals, terminal handling, character IO system, terminal drivers, file system, swapping, block IO system, disk and tape drivers, CPU scheduling, page replacement, demand paging, virtual memory and so on. So all these will come under kernel, and above this kernel we have shells and commands, compilers and interpreters, system libraries. Okay, and above this we have users. So again between this and this we have the system call interface to the kernel, because here we have the system programs and here we have the kernel, and to separate this to facilitate the communication and to separate these two, we have the system call interface to the kernel. Okay, So here you can see here the things are arranged in the form of a layer. So you can consider this as layer 0. So we have layer 1, layer 2 and layer 3. Okay. So layer 0 as usual it is hardware, and layer n is nothing but the user interface. Okay. And here we know that these will, because this is layer 0, this is layer 1. Layer 1 can make use of the services that are available on layer 0. Similarly, layer 2 can make use of the services that are available from these two. Okay, and so on. So this is an example of the layered structure. Okay. So after this, the third category is microkernels. So as the name itself indicates, microkernel means here you are making the kernel size minimum. Okay, that is micro. So here in the previous case also we saw here the kernel is having lot of different entities. So in order, here in this way you are going to load the kernel. So in case of microkernel, what we do is, so whatever the unnecessary information or unnecessary components that were available with the kernel, so these will be moved to the user space in order to minimize the size of your kernel. So that becomes your microkernel. Okay. So here it moves as much from the kernel into the user space, and the communication takes place between the user modules using the message passing. So here, in order to have the communication between the user modules, it uses the message passing technique for the as a means of inter-process communication. So what are the benefits of having microkernel? So the first one is, it is easier to extend a microkernel. Okay, because as and when required, you may add the components to this particular microkernel. It is very easy. The second one is easier to port the operating system to a new architecture. Okay. Next one is more reliable, because less coding is running in the kernel mode. Anyway, you have made the kernel itself as small, so the reliability will be more. So next one is more secure. Okay. So detriment is the performance overhead of user space to kernel space communication. Because see, here what happens, this is one of the possible disadvantage here, because here you know that major part from the kernel will be moved to the user space, but in order to have the actual communication, in order to have the actual task to be done, so many times the communication should take place between the microkernel and the user space. So this itself will become an overhead of the performance. Okay. So the examples for this is 264, Unix, Match and QNX. Okay. So here we have just shown the example of the microkernel. The example is Mac OS X structure. So this is an example for the modular approach also. So here you can see whatever the kernel is there. So we have a micro match kernel here. Okay. So apart from this, again the rest of the things remain same. So after this, the fourth approach or the architecture is the modular, that is modules. So here the operating system is implemented in terms of the loadable modules. Okay, so here the most modern operating systems implement the kernel in terms of the loadable modules. Means what happens here? So whatever the basic necessary functionalities are there, only those basic necessary functionalities will be kept in the kernel to make the kernel smaller than even the microkernel. Okay, so in this case we have again the loadable modules. So loadable module means each module will indicate a particular set of activities that the kernel may want to perform. Okay, so when the kernel want to perform a particular set of activities, that corresponding module is to be loaded into the kernel. Okay, so this is nothing but the loadable modules. So here it uses the object oriented approach. Each core component is separate. Each talks to the others over the own interfaces, and each loadable as needed within the kernel. It's very important. Okay, so each module is separate with each other. Each module is going to talk to the other module using its own interface. Okay, means here there will not be any communication overhead as we saw in the previous microkernel approach. And the last one is each module is loadable as and when required to the kernel. Okay, so overall it's a similar to the layers approach, but it is more flexible than the layers approach. The examples include Solaris, Linux and Mac OS X. So here we have an example Solaris modular approach here. So you can see the middle one is the core Solaris kernel, means whatever the basic or necessary functions that are there, only those are available here. So along with this we have the set of loadable modules. Okay, so as and when required you can load these modules, and when you complete the task you can unload this. Okay, so what are the loadable modules available on Solaris? So we have file systems, means if you want to have the functionality of this file system you can temporarily load this, and if you don't want you can unload this. Similarly we have loadable system calls, okay, executable formats, streams, modules, okay, miscellaneous modules, device and bus drivers, scheduling classes, and so on. Okay, so these are nothing but the modules which can be loaded into this core Solaris kernel as and when required. Okay, so this is about the modular approach. Okay, so with this I stop the today's discussion, and will continue the remaining parts discussion in my next video from this chapter. Thank you.